It's time to debunk another lie from the facehole of that prevaricating preacher, John Paul Miller. In our last Liar Liar Pants on Fire video, we talked about Mica's augmentation surgery. John Paul said that two things happened after her surgery. We covered the first one in the last video, which involved a post-surgery complication. And now we're going to talk about the second thing. In the interview that John Paul had with Flo on TikTok, this is what he said. Quote, "Another thing happened was when she came out of anesthesia in the hospital, she started speaking different languages. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And they weren't real languages. She thought they were. She said, I can speak 3 languages. And she started talking. And I said, there's something weird going on. And I brought her home, thinking that maybe she needed some water. I don't know what's happened." End quote. What kind of idiot thinks that someone is speaking made-up languages because they need water? I'm sure she had an IV drip during surgery, so dehydration probably wasn't an issue. Besides, somewhere in the mounds of documents I have about John Paul, he said that the doctor had already diagnosed her as having a psychotic break. Remember that one, Wonder Boy? There was another time that John Paul accused Mica of speaking 3 languages. In a video that the ever-incoherently verbose Tracy Citrullo posted on TikTok, Mica was recording herself to show her therapist that she was learning Spanish and sign language. I think she was making a video because John Paul had told her therapist that she was mentally ill because she thought she could speak other languages. So Mica was recording to show her therapist what she meant. John Paul was recording her too because that's normal, right? The sentimental text superimposed on the video clip I'm getting ready to show about how Mica and John Paul were so cute together was made by Tracy, not me.
Go ahead, double recording.
I am. Wait, so you're saying that you learned how to speak Spanish in less than a week?
All right, doctor. He learned to play piano. He claims God taught him at the age of what?
You learned to speak sign language
No,
too,
this
right?
is about you.
So John Paul claimed that God taught him how to play the piano overnight? Sure, Jan. I think we all know that your father, who taught piano lessons, was probably the one who taught you how to play.
Why don't you, and then I'll say you, understand?
Speak Spanish. Say, why don't you understand in Spanish? Say
I've
that.
already said that.
Say it again, let me hear.
And then when Mica showed a phrase in sign language, he mocked her. What kind of man laughs at his wife for learning new languages and tries to make it look like she's mentally ill because of it? An abusive one, that's who. Laughing at and mocking your partner when they are trying to learn something new is abusive. In his 111-page affidavit that John Paul filed with the court for absolutely no reason except to try and dictate the narrative, he included an email that he sent to Mica in January of 2018. In the letter, he has a list of what supposedly happens when Mica isn't on her medication. Number 8 on his list reads, "When off your medication, you think that you are learning other languages and musical instruments, when in reality you are wasting times on things that didn't line up with your real life." In the previously mentioned video, Mica was telling John Paul that the reason she wanted to learn Spanish was because there were customers who came into the Honda dealership where she worked, and she wanted to be able to speak to them. That sounds like it lines up with her real life perfectly, you putz. And which was it? Was she speaking 3 languages because she was having a psychotic episode? Or was she wasting her time by learning other languages? And let's look a little closer at this email that he sent Mica. In it, he made a list that he titled, Pros and Cons of Being on Medication. Number 1, when you were off your medication or not taking your medication, it cost us a lot of emotional hardship and pain. 2, when you were off your medication or not taking your medication, we suffered a lot financially. 3, when you were off your medication or not taking your medication, you were unaware of what really was and what was really going on, regardless of what you thought. In other words, you were deceived. 4, when you were off your medication, you were unable to function in the workplace. 5, when you're off your medication, you are unable to determine what is normal and what is abnormal. 6, when off your medication, you can't function in the area of your calling, singing, leading worship. 7, when off your medication, you don't sleep properly. 8, when off your medication, you think that you are learning other languages and musical instruments, when in reality you were wasting time on things that didn't line up with your real life. 9. When off your medication, you were totally fine with being in a mental facility. 10. When off your medication, you draw things and talk about things that nobody understands and that are pointless to your destiny, and you communicated those things in ways that were unhealthy. And then he has 2 more numbered points. 1. When you were on your medication, you gain weight. Number 2. When you were on your medication, you feel lethargic. Where are the pros in this list? Everything that you wrote is a con, you doofus. I think those 10 statements are perfect examples of exactly how John Paul gaslighted Mica and tried to make her believe that she was so mentally ill she couldn't function. And did you notice how many times he changes the verb tense in his writing? He switches back and forth from present to past and past to present tense. When someone changes their tense while telling a narrative, it can be indicative that the person speaking is lying. Here's an excerpt from a Psychology Today article that touches on this phenomenon. Quote, "When fabricating information or facts, liars mentally rehearse their stories in the present tense. When they are satisfied that the fabricated stories are plausible, they must then translate the present tense information or facts into the past tense to simulate a truthful narrative. Liars often fail to translate all the present tense verbs into the past tense and subconsciously speak or write narratives using both past and present tense verbs. Information or facts spoken or written in the present tense suggests deception." End quote. I think if we were to go back and listen to some of the interviews John Paul has done, or even just read what he's had to say about Mica's alleged mental illness, we would see a lot of switching up between the past and the present. And let me just add that if I had to choose between living with JP or being in a mental facility, I'd choose the latter. Stay tuned for more lies from the eternal well of John Paul Miller's falsehoods. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.